I'll do it. Everybody,
Hello.
welcome back to another episode of Bedlam Beyond Mental Illness. We have a guest host who is sitting on my lap and clawing my leg. It is Neo.
Neo is a three-legged black cat. He's perfect.
He is perfect. Perfectly peens in my butt. Before we get started, I told you I had a little something for you. But I don't want to show. Okay. So it's just a tiny little something.
Okay.
Just a tiny little something.
Oh, wow.
It's a sticker.
That's so cute.
Don't believe everything you think. So that's new in our merch store. I have a sweater I sewed up, but
that one's a
sticker.
Is it like a camper van coming out of his head?
Yeah.
Love
did it. Loved it. I said, I want a dinosaur, and this is the slogan. And she goes, okay, what if a train or a camper van or something coming out of the...
Makes perfect sense to me, because that's exactly what my brain does to me.
Right?
It's a whole camper van of bullshit.
Right? I thought you would love it.
I love it. Thank you very much.
When I ordered my sweater, I'm like, I have to order a sticker for you. And then obviously I couldn't wait till Christmas, because
I think it would look really cute on a t-shirt. I don't think you can see it, but
yeah, it's definitely on t-shirt. Like, you can go to the merch store and get it on t-shirts.
T-shirts. Because the shirts are for your teats. Sorry.
It's been a long week.
It's been a really long week.
Anyways, we are your hosts, Randi-lee Boslaw, Renata DeCarmen, and Renata did the research today.
Yes, I did.
So I get to sit back and enjoy. Ready, Neo? He's ready. He's like, yeah, I'm ready.
So as is the case usually with me when I'm doing research on something, or I go off onto little tangents. So I will be doing that today. You're welcome. The topic is basically grief. How did grief counseling or grief therapy, how did it start? Why did it start? When? Yeah, basically. So
the history.
So I look at a little bit of the history. I delve into, like I said, tangents. Just, I think bring myself back in. I'm gonna give you I'll cite my sources first. Thank you. They're little triangles.
Yeah, I like that.
The young people like these.
The
okay, sources. Mayim Bialik's breakdown. That's not how you say your name. It's Mayim Bialik. How do you say?
Oh, the one from the Big
Bang. Yeah.
Blossom.
Mayim. It is Mayim, but her last name Bialik.
I have no idea.
Anyways,
y'all know who that is
from her breakdown podcast. There was a small blurb written about the brief history of grief. Of course, I went to Wikipedia. Of course, I did.
Obviously.
And then I went to I forget whose site this is. I do later on. I do cite them. It's ncbi.nlm.gov. I think it's a British.
NCBI. I know that one. I don't know the name.
It's a medical-ish.
Yeah, I've definitely used it before.
We've used it before. Yeah,
it's a good one.
So in 1917, Freud published Mourning and Melancholia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In that, he proposed that a bereaved individual must engage in grief work to properly heal from a loss.
Okay.
Grief work is the process by which a person breaks their bond to the deceased, adjusts to their new life, and forms new relationships.
Okay,
this is according to what he wrote. And honestly, I didn't have the time, but I would love to delve deeper into whether or not before this, I think that great minds must have talked about.
Yeah. Well,
maybe they called it something else, but they must have talked about it.
Maybe you have a follow-up podcast. Yeah. That's all you.
Yeah. According to this theory, the best way to overcome grief is to throw oneself into other aspects of life.
I've heard that. It's something like people do say that.
It's a popular tactic or strategy to this day. Absolutely.
Not that I'm completely redoing my bedroom because my sister died. No, not.
Right? To distract your brain, to occupy your mind.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The next big development in grief theory happened in the late 1960s when, and most people will have heard of this, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote On Death and Dying in 1969. She wrote that, but she theorized that grief occurs in predictable stages.
Oh, the 5 stages.
Yes, exactly. She was a Swiss American psychiatrist who died in 2004. Yeah, she wrote On Death and Dying in 1969. And in it is when she first discussed her theory of the 5 stages of grief.
Okay.
These stages were denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. These stages, or this theory, is still talked about today. People still largely will say, they'll reference these stages.
Yeah, definitely.
It was what I didn't know, because I've not read On Death and Dying. Mm-hmm. What I did not know is that her theory was originally based on anecdotal evidence only.
Oh.
Rather than an empirical scientific study, which makes sense, because why would you, when you're talking about emotions, would you?
Well, how could you, because you'd have to have a control group and a not control group.
How would you measure it?
Yeah, I can't see, because you'd still have to have, everyone would have had to have lost someone. So how do you do a control group and a not control group in this situation? It would have to be anecdotal.
It would have to be. Yeah. So here's one of my little, I would never discredit the anecdotal at all. No. But here's one of my little asides. The word anecdotal triggers something in me. When I was taking a college course in adult education, so this is only maybe 5 years ago, I don't know what I was talking about, but I mentioned anecdotal research as being of value. Mm-hmm. The instructor stopped me and said, "We don't need to hear about any jokes." And I said nothing. I was like this. But there was one person who worked at the university, local university, one academic in the room who actually very gently, full of class, interrupted her to say that actually that's not what that means. An anecdote, sure, that's a story or a joke, sure. But anecdotal evidence is formed by people's stories of what happened to them in specific circumstances or situations. Yeah. And I had a prof many, many years ago when I went to university who swore by phenomenology, which is a valid research methodology relying heavily on anecdotal evidence. So think about it. When you learn things, or when you're trying to understand things, you do listen to people's stories about what they experience.
Right.
So 100%. Why is it not valid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Having said all of that, most scientists today, so that's scientists, not necessarily practitioners in the field.
Yes.
They think that grief is much less linear than clear stage theory.
That is what I would say for my anecdotal experience.
Yeah.
It is much more.
I would say it's or like this.
Yeah, I was going to say circular, but I feel like it's not even circular. It's like
down.
This.
Circular,
it's like a roller coaster
up
over. And
let's write a book.
Let's do it. Oh, wait, we did.
We did. Do it again. Okay, so in 1999, Margaret Strobe and Henk Schut, and I'm probably mispronouncing, they came up with a dual process model of grief. This theory suggests that grieving individuals engage with stress involved in loss, as well as the stress involved in returning to normalcy.
Okay.
So there's a stress of losing, and there's a stress of trying to get back to normal.
You know what? Yeah.
Whatever the hell that means. While doing so,
new normal.
While working on that, people tend to oscillate between two states: loss orientation, what they refer to as LO, and restoration orientation, or RO. While in LO, the griever engages in emotion-focused coping. Different tactics are used to avoid the negative emotions associated with loss.
Like avoiding thinking about it.
Yeah. Distracting yourself with activity or whatever.
Redoing your entire bedroom. It's gorgeous though, guys.
It is. It's a very nice light aqua. Yeah. It's one of my favorite colors. Mm-hmm. In RO, the griever engages in problem-focused coping. So that is, again, restoration orientation.
Okay.
Problem-focused coping, where the griever makes active efforts to confront and overcome stressors.
Okay, so that could be like going to a therapist and really talking through it.
I guess.
That's what I would think. There's probably other ways, but that's where my mind went, is going. That's why they have like grief groups and grief counseling, right? You need to actively discuss or get over however with that person, get it off your chest.
So LO, I guess, would be a more emotional person who's doing things just to distract themselves from their grief, and the RO person would be somebody who's doing something that would be considered to be more constructive.
I think so.
All right.
I mean, if y'all have a different opinion, share.
But even today, obviously, with our advanced understanding of how the brain works, we still are
You know
far
what I
from
just
understanding.
realized?
What?
Totally off topic. But that was, you said that was in the 90s.
That was in the late 90s, yeah.
Late 90s. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's not that long ago. And then I went, holy crap, that's 25 years ago.
I know.
That is a lot. That is actually a long time in the way of research. Because then when you're like, so nowadays,
It's a long time. It's a long time. I know.
It's almost
Living through the turn of a century is interesting because that's what it tricks us.
Yeah.
We forget that 2000 was 24 years ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a couple of years ago. Yeah. Okay, so moving on. According to Wikipedia, grief counseling is a form of psychotherapy that aims to help people cope with everything, the physical, emotional, social, spiritual, cognitive responses to loss, because it does impact our whole selves.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. These experiences are thought to be brought on by a loved person's death, but may more broadly be understood as shaped by any significant life-altering loss. Can you think of any?
That's what I was going to say. So, especially on Ride or Die, the other show, right? I've talked to so many people that have been talking about loss and grief and the loss of a pet, the loss of a job, the loss of your home.
Yep.
Even if the loss of your home is planned, you have this great new job that you're looking forward to, you're still losing your sense of where you were from. It's still a type of grief. And so many people, you're grieving, oh, you've lost a person. There's so much more. And might sound absolutely horrible, but I think a lot of people will agree with me. The loss of my cat was far harder than the loss of my brother.
No, I think a lot of people will agree with you.
Because, just before everyone jumps down my throat, because for my brother, I lost him long before his death.
Before you lost him.
Right? Yeah. Long before. I had already grieved the loss of my brother and our relationship long before. I cried like a crazy person when he fully died because I knew that would never come back. But my cat was with me every single day for 19 years. She moved with me. She was homeless with me. She went through college with me. Like she taught Lev how to walk. There's a funny story about that. But like she was there for every big event. So like that loss was much harder because it had an impact on my day-to-day life. Yeah. Right. So don't discredit the loss of other things.
I think a lot of people don't even maybe understand about themselves that they're going through a loss, they're going through grief. They don't because they don't associate what's happened with grief.
Right.
Loss of a job, loss of a partner, loss of a. You're right. I mean, right now, my father, who is elderly and is confined to bed, has been this way since January. Yeah. I have gone through anticipatory grief through the whole thing. I think I'm kind of coming out on the other end of that, but definitely that is an intense grief as well.
Yeah,
definitely. Right.
Yeah, I don't think that one's talked about very much either. No. The anticipatory grief, because he is going to be dying at some point. Hopefully not super near, but he's also
not going to bound out of bed and be.
No, he's not coming back from the illness that he has.
And when he was always an active person, full of life, did everything, ate life, like just loved life.
Yeah.
So very difficult, but that's grief.
And actually, as you're saying that, I mean, for elderly people people with chronic illness too also have this. They are grieving the life that they had. Like now that your dad is basically confined to a bed, he probably is thinking, I want to go do this.
I used to do all of this.
Right? There's this entire grieving process for the life that they had.
Yeah. And you're right. I have two very close friends who are younger than I am, who are both going through different but similar sort of, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Like chronic illness, pain.
Chronic illness to do with inflammation, lots of pain, lots and lots of pain. Exactly, that's exactly what they are experiencing. Yeah, grief of loss of a whole kind of a lifestyle,
an entire identity.
Yeah.
When I stopped doing kickboxing, and I've tried to take it back up again, and my plantar fasciitis is flared so bad I couldn't walk for 3 days. I'm still working on figuring out how I can get back to doing it. But when I stopped doing it, it's an entire identity loss. Like I was wrapped up in the fact that I am a cafe. Not this is something I do and I enjoy. No, I am this.
I went through, like, not to gross anybody out or upset anybody, but I went through, or whatever this might do. I went through early menopause, which at the time I did not know what was happening to me. I was in my early 30s. I had always been very fit. And suddenly I'm gaining weight, and suddenly I'm this, and suddenly I'm that, and nobody could give me answers, and nobody would test me as I asked until much later.
Yeah.
When it was verified for me that, oh yeah, full-blown menopause, I was 38. I had just had my son.
I was gonna say you had him late.
So, yeah, he was a surprise. I didn't think that would happen for me. So he was a surprise menopause baby. Women around me did not compute or understand that there was grief associated with that, with menopause. And possibly it's because I was younger.
I was going to say menopause you think of as being an older thing, right? Like at least a decade off at minimum. More.
I couldn't wrap my head around it, and people around me were definitely nobody was in any way empathetic. They were saying things like, "Oh, you're so lucky you don't get your period anymore. I would love that." I'm like, "No, you fucking wouldn't."
Yeah.
Like, no, you wouldn't.
I make that joke because I had to have the hysterectomy because of cancer, and I make the joke. Well, if I had to have cancer, at least it was the one that gave me no more period. Yeah. I have to make light of
that
situation.
gallows humor, which I love, which we should actually talk about sometime.
We should. Yeah, I think you would be good at researching that one.
I'm going to.
Okay.
All right. Anyway,
you're gonna forget.
No, write it down. Grief counselors believe that everyone experiences and expresses grief in personally unique ways. Shaped by your family background, by culture, life experiences, personal values, intrinsic beliefs. And I can tell you that, like, growing up in a Roman Catholic Italian family, grief was like very sort of dramatic and loud. And so, yeah, I understand that until I kind of surrounded myself or was surrounded by other people from different backgrounds. And I could see how grief was processed differently. I was like, oh, that looks better.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Grief counselors believe that it is not uncommon for a person to withdraw from friends, family, and feel helpless. Some might be angry and want to take action. Some may laugh, while others experience strong regrets or guilt. Tears or
how about all of that?
All of it.
All of that.
All of it, sure.
Yeah.
Tears or the lack of crying are both seen as appropriate expressions of grief. Because, some people will say, she wasn't even crying.
Yeah.
I didn't even care.
Right?
You don't know what's going on in the camper van of their brain.
Exactly. I love it. The camper van of the brain.
Grief counseling is typically recommended for individuals who experience difficulties dealing with a personally significant loss. Grief counseling sessions work on increasing an individual's personal and social resources.
You know what else you could grieve? The loss of a limb. Neo's making me think of that now. And actually there's...
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, there's somebody actually at my day job. He just got back to work because he had to have his leg amputated, and he's in good spirits about it. Like he makes jokes like, "Oh, I'm going to be a pirate for Halloween."
Oh my god, I would.
Yeah, he's such a nice guy. We're lucky to have him back because he's a really good worker. But yeah, there's definitely, like, I would assume that there would be some grief surrounding that, because your entire life is really changing at that point. Like he's now has a cane, he has a walker, he has to be careful what he's doing.
Yep. And like, what does he do with his pant leg? Does he pin it up? Does he tie it in a bow?
Well, it's been summer, so I don't know. He's been wearing shorts.
Okay. Just food for thought.
Yeah.
Let me know. Let me know what he does.
He'll probably make a joke about it because that's the kind of guy he is.
He probably will.
Yeah. But that is, like you said, you can deal with loss in that way.
Fascinating.
How did you do it, Neo? Yeah. He said he just got pets and loves and was over it.
Meowed a little bit.
Yeah. Little meows for some extra treats. Yeah. Okay.
So here's the different types of grief. Anticipatory, which we talked about a little bit.
Yeah.
It's referring to the sense of loss before the actual occurrence of loss. Mm-hmm. Like with terminal illness or even chronic illness.
Yeah.
Or facing the loss of some human function.
So amputation, maybe. Yeah. There we go.
Normal grief, which why do we even call anything normal? But anyway, normal grief is the natural experience of loss and emotions that follow the death of a loved one, usually subside in intensity over time. Normal grief is often accompanied by the symptoms of a depressed mood, sleep disturbances, and crying.
Yep.
Complicated grief.
Ooh.
This is a grief that is prolonged and results in severe behavioral concerns such as suicidal ideation, addictions, risk-taking behavior, displaying symptoms of mental health concerns.
I have a story for this one.
Okay.
Just so on my way back after I dropped my husband off at work this morning, I was listening to My Favorite Murder, and they were talking about École Polytechnique, the massacre.
Yep. Did this occur before you were born?
Yes.
So
No, I was a baby.
I was in university the first time. Yeah, I remember this very vividly.
Yeah. I was just a wee babe. Because it was what, 89, I think they said it was. Yeah. I was a wee babe. Just two. I was 2. Anyway, so they actually did a really good job on it because they gave all the credit. Credit sounds like a horrible way to say it, but they talked about more of the victims. They did not mention the shooter's name.
Good.
To make sure that
whose name I cannot forget, by the way.
Yes.
But good.
But we are trying to
not
give
going
them
to say it.
exactly, not give them the spotlight. And anyway, so the way this works into what we're talking about, and you can go listen to their episode, My Favorite Murder. They're really hilarious. I enjoy them.
Very entertaining, yeah.
Yeah. They kind of do it like this kind of style.
Sort of.
One person tells the story, the other person listens.
They probably wear makeup though.
They don't go on camera.
Video.
They don't do a video. We are as we are.
Yeah.
My drink. So at one point, so to give a little background, this was one of the first school shootings in Canada, I feel like. Happened in Quebec.
Yes.
At a university. So it was adults. And basically the shooter was somebody who couldn't get into the school and was misogynistic and fuck women was basically his stance.
He targeted women in a certain discipline that he thought was women shouldn't be in.
Yeah. So it's an engineering school, very high and very smart people. Like the women that were killed, they were talking about and most of them were about to graduate. Like it was all finals. Anyways, one of the male survivors had so much guilt about not being able to help that I think they said it was 8 months later that he took his life.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then it was, I can't remember how long, but then his parents ended up a few months or a year later taking their lives because they couldn't handle the fact that they couldn't help their son and their son couldn't, right? So that complicated grief stays with you is very severe, and you do need to seek help when you have that, when it keeps crushing your soul. Yeah, and you're having these bad thoughts, you really need to go and seek help, especially like this situation was completely out of his hands.
That's so tragic.
And yeah, so they spoke about one of the male survivors, because basically what the shooter did, he came in and said males leave, and he just targeted women. I don't think any males even got a ricochet from what I heard, right? Like it was all women that were murdered or injured, and it's absolutely horrific. So that complicated grief.
Yeah. Was this a new one or was this a flashback one? I thought they had talked about it before, but maybe they just referenced.
I think they just referenced.
Okay, so this is actually a.
And I went back in their catalog a little bit to look for something, so I don't know when it was. It wasn't like a super recent, but it wasn't super old. It was just a couple scrolls because they have a ton of episodes, so it was just a couple scrolls. Yeah. But yeah, so complicated grief. Woo,
there you go. Perfect example. Yes. Yeah. And then there is disenfranchised grief.
Oh, I don't know this one.
Me either. This is a grief that is not made. Oh, this makes sense.
Okay.
Not made known to or not recognized by others. An example could be the case of an extramarital lover whose lover passed on. In these cases, the grieving process is compromised because they can't process through it with anybody else, and they can't receive the social support they need. Unless they go to therapy, which they should do.
Right, what they should do, so that it does turn into.
But also don't have an affair.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I feel like if you just don't have an affair, then you can't be in this.
Don't mean to be an ass hole, but don't have an affair. But also, I can't think of another example.
No, me neither. So, okay, so read that definition without the marital part. Like the...
It's a grief that is not made known to or recognized by others.
I could think of one. So, what if somebody had a miscarriage?
Oh,
and they weren't ready to share the news, so nobody was around to know, or however they have a miscarriage and they have nobody to share that with.
I can speak exclusively personally to that. I was
miscarriage.
Yeah.
What?
I had more than one. I worked someplace which shall remain nameless with a manager who shall remain nameless, who, because it was invisible, I told her about the first one.
Mm-hmm.
She asked me certain questions because she too had one, but your experiences are never mirror images of each other. So I kind of looked at her like confused. I didn't really know what she was saying because my experience hadn't been like hers. So she didn't believe me when I then had subsequent miscarriage, and then I had something called a complete molar pregnancy.
Oh, I've never heard of that one.
She believed none of this. This molar pregnancy is it's basically referred to as a oh my god, I've lost my vocabulary because I'm so tired, but it's a pregnancy that has cancer basically.
Oh. So you really, like, when Emery came, it was really a shock.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Wow.
Yeah, big super surprise. So this was in my early 30s when all this happened.
Yeah.
She didn't believe me.
Oh, dang.
And then when I was still working there when I became pregnant with Emery, and she wanted to see a
like an ultrasound
because she didn't. Yeah, she was terrible. I
have some choice
I did
words.
leave there shortly after he was born. Actually, when he was 4 months old, my mother died, and that is when I was like, I cannot stay here. I must leave this job.
Aww.
So I did.
You'll have to tell me what that job is when we're not recording.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah. You guys don't get to know. I get to know that because I'm your best friend.
Okay, so a different theory on grief cycles. This is from somebody who I've never heard of.
Oh, okay.
Joanne Josefowski wrote something called the Phoenix Phenomenon, Rising from the Ashes of Grief. She summarizes 5 stages to rebuild a shattered life. So I don't know.
It's a good title, though.
So there's impact.
Yeah.
Shock, denial, anxiety, fear, panic. Yeah. There's chaos, confusion, disbelief, out of control actions, irrational thoughts and feelings, despair, helplessness.
Yeah.
Maybe obsessive focus on the loved one and their stuff. Oh.
You know what? It's so weird. So when Brandon died, we went to his room to clean it out. I don't know if this quite classifies as obsessive, but my mom was cleaning it out and they said, whatever is garbage, leave there. We will just throw it out. Okay. And it was pretty much all garbage. I think we ended up with like 2 pictures and a Bible when we left. Like, honestly, it was all garbage. But my mom kind of lost it.
Wanted to take care of the garbage.
Wanted to take care of all of it and a little obsessive about, no, this is my son's stuff. I need to do this and I'm going to do it. And she just like,
that's heartbreaking. I get it. Totally get it. I could see me doing that.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. I had to leave. I went outside and called Andrew and cried on the phone with him.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Adapting. So that's bringing order back into daily life while you continue to grieve. So you take care of your basic needs.
Yeah.
You learn to live without them. You accept help. You focus on helping people around you cope. You connect with others, perhaps, for mutual support. You take control of your grieving so that grief doesn't control you.
That's good.
Then there's equilibrium, attaining stability in routines. You're reestablishing a life that works okay. You enjoy activities again with family or friends. You do productive work. You choose a positive new direction while you honor the past. And you learn how to handle people who ask questions about what you've been through. That's a big one.
That is a hard one.
Yeah. That's a big one.
So, I mean, at this point, I could talk about Brandon fine, but for those of you who don't really know, my sister died last month.
Yeah.
So, in the last episode, when we said lots of stuff has happened,
that's one of the things we were referring to.
Yeah. So I'm still not quite ready to talk like this about it.
Yeah.
But like, we definitely talk.
Yeah.
We talk about it, but that it's okay.
Happiness.
Yeah.
And then transformation. So this is about rethinking your purpose in life and the basis of your identity, looking for a meaning in tragic, senseless loss, allowing yourself to have both painful and positive feelings about your loss, and becoming able to choose which feelings you focus on, allowing yourself to discover what your struggle has led you to develop. A stronger, better version of yourself than you expected could exist. Learning how to talk with others about your heroic healing journey without exposing them to your pain. Becoming supportive of others who are trying to deal with similar losses or their own losses.
I feel like this matches my experiences more than the 5 stages.
Me too.
This definitely hits home a lot more.
Not as famous as that one, but we should maybe
when
we should
was
look
that
at
one?
1999.
That was 99 too?
Yeah.
What was in the 5 stages in 99?
69.
Oh, 69. Okay. What else was in 99 that I was thinking?
That was the 1999 was the dual process model.
Right. I knew there was something. So okay, so over time it changed. So
it's kind of like an evolution.
Yeah, the 30 years is a pretty big chunk of time to change. Oh my gosh, that means it's gonna change again soon. It's almost 30 years.
For all I know, because honestly, I went down a certain rabbit hole. So for all I know, there already is. Yeah. I know that I went down a rabbit hole where there was. They are trying to do some sort of empirical studies of not necessarily grief and as opposed to non-grief, but grief and how it impacts not just the emotional but the physical. You know, the whole broken heart thing. Yes. Okay, so then grief counseling versus grief therapy. What? There's the difference.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
There is a distinction. Counseling involves helping people move through uncomplicated or normal grief to health and resolution. Grief therapy involves the use of clinical tools for traumatic or complicated grief. Right? I did not know there was a difference.
No, me neither.
So this could occur where the grief reaction is prolonged or is manifesting through bodily or behavioral symptoms. Or by a grief response, which is outside the range of cultural or psychiatrically defined normality. Oh, yeah. I don't know what we're at time-wise, but if you want to stop,
it's 31 minutes.
Do you want to stop and we can do part 2 another time?
Is there a lot more to do in part 2?
No, actually, because I go off into the rabbit hole of that whole. Broken heart thing, so I'll stop before I get there. I have just this much more.
Oh, then let's just finish, and then you can do a whole another episode for the broken heart. And anything else you want to add?
Because I find that fascinating.
Yeah.
So grief therapy is a kind of psychotherapy to treat severe or complicated grief, traumatic grief reactions, usually brought on by the loss of a close person or by some sort of disaster. The goal of grief therapy is to identify and solve the psychological and emotional problems which appeared as a consequence of the loss.
Yes.
A common area where grief therapy has been extensively applied is with the parents of cancer patients. Which, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. Yeah. There are controversies surrounding grief counseling / therapy. Researchers have suggested that people may resort to receiving grief therapy in the absence of complicated or abnormal grief reactions. So people who maybe are just experiencing normal grief, but maybe it's too much for them. Maybe they're feeling like I don't want to.
Yeah.
So they go to a certain kind of grief therapy. And then in such cases, the grief therapy itself causes a normal bereavement response to turn pathological.
Oh.
I didn't get into how, but I can understand that.
Yeah. Okay.
Others have argued that grief therapy is highly effective for people who suffer from unusually prolonged and complicated responses to bereavement. And I can say that when I lost my mother, so my son was 4 months old when my mom died. My relationship ended shortly after. I would say that my grief was prolonged because of the other things going on in my life and how much my life was impacted in so many other ways.
Yeah. And I think that's what really does make it complicated is all these other things.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the last thing that I'll bring up is that there was a March 2007 journal article. It included grief counseling and therapy on a list of treatments with the potential to cause harm to clients.
Oh.
In particular, individuals experiencing relatively normal bereavement reactions were said to be at risk of a worse outcome after receiving grief counseling. But again, I didn't go into this, but it has been criticized. This sort of thinking has been criticized by people in the field as lacking scientific rigor.
Yeah, I think it really just when Brandon died, I didn't specifically go seeking counseling for that, but it was definitely part of what we were working through while I was already going to my regular therapist.
Yeah.
And it super helped.
Yeah.
With Jen, I didn't because I feel like I know better coping strategies because I already did.
Yeah.
Right? So,
interesting.
Yeah, it's just food for thought.
So remember you and I were like, what is the NCBI? What is that?
It's
the National Library of Medicine.
Okay. I knew it was
NCBI.NLM. Yeah. National. So anyway, when I talk about the broken heart, whatever,
I
will talk. That's when I actually reference them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll do an episode.
Lots of different rabbit holes to go down.
Yes. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Excellent. All right. Well, that was okay. Lots of anecdotal evidence.
Yes, I would say.
But yeah, I think that one that was in 99 definitely matches better than the one from 69. Yeah. Right. Well, it was lovely being here with you today. We will be with you again when we can.
We'll try to make it sooner, but
our intention is to do 2 episodes a month, but we don't scheduling and life. One day maybe we'll get our shit together.
Yeah. We used to be able to do things consistently.
Yeah.
Shit happens though.
That's life. That's life. All right. So until next time. Bye.